friends. Welcome back to the Luminous Education Revolution. I'm your host, Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, and welcome to this session titled Nurturing the Whole Being, Exploring Life, Truth, and the Nature of Reality. As a community of holistically minded moms, dads, and educators, we all want the very best for our kids. We want to nurture their well-being on all levels, body, mind, emotions, and soul. We want our kids to be intelligent, happy, successful, fulfilled, but what does that really entail? On my journey as a holistic medicine practitioner, I found that the best results in medicine came not based on different tools, tactics, or modalities, like a special diet or herb or fancy treatment, but the best results came when we took a huge step back to ask deeper questions and realign our 3D day-to-day activities to an inner orientation or an inner state of being. And when our physical actions and behaviors are coherent and aligned from the inside out, that's when we get the most powerful results. So when I became a mom, I started wondering if that's not just the case with medicine, but with education and parenting too. What if we took a huge step back and asked fundamental questions like, what is it to be a human? Who are we? What is life really for? And we can allow these questions to inspire our education choices, that maybe that's when the most effective and satisfying results can take place. To explore all of this with us today is one of my favorite people in the whole world, Dr. Barre Lando. Dr. Barre is a true Renaissance polymath, someone who has a mastery of many, many topics. In the future, I hope that more human beings can operate at Dr. Barre's caliber so that it's not quite so rare. But for now, I really consider him to be a national treasure. To just give you a taster, here's a little bit of Dr. Barre's bio. Dr. Barre Lando has traveled a fascinating and eclectic path through athletics and academics into becoming a physician, a kinesiologist, a functional movement specialist, and a master gardener. As an undergrad, he was both pre-law and pre-med. He maintained a 4.0 GPA in his studies and was a Division I football player. He later taught at university levels after completing his graduate degree in social psychology. Dr. Barre obtained his MICP certification at Stanford Medical School and served several years as a paramedic firefighter. Next came his studies in naturopathy, oriental medicine, classical homeopathy at Pacific College of Naturopathic Medicine, and then followed by Chiropractic College, where he graduated summa cum laude. He's also a chartered diplomate in kinesiology from Body Integration International. He has completed numerous postdoctoral trainings and certifications in holistic approaches to medicine, like bioterrain medicine, Japanese meridian therapy, craniotherapy, visceral manipulation, functional movement specialist, endobiogenics, and German new medicine. He began his private clinical practice in 1981 and developed an international following of people suffering from chronic degenerative conditions. And in recent years, he earned his Master Gardener in Permaculture certification and now oversees the very popular, very awesome off-grid medicinal farm at Alfacasts Gardens. Today, Dr. Lando is retired from clinical practice, but he stays very active creating formulations for his herbal company and developing medicinal protocols based on waveform physics, and also hosting numerous educational programs for a community of truth seekers. Those of you who tune in weekly to Dr. Barre's podcast, you know that this bio doesn't even begin to do justice to the diverse array of topics in which Dr. Barre has expertise. So please, without further ado, help me in welcoming the founder of Alfacasts Gardens, a true Renaissance polymath, a man who I am deeply honored to call a friend and a mentor, a man who I see as a national treasure of our times, the one and only Dr. Barre Lando. Welcome, Dr. Barre.
Hi, Edith. I don't know if I can live up to your intro there, but I'll try. Thank you. I'm honored to be here and in such great company and just an amazing forum you put together. So thank you.
Yeah, I think after listening to that bio is so refreshing for our audience to just feel your presence. You're so grounded and humble. That's the beauty that I think we all I think want to aspire to. It's like to be so badass as you, but also just so grounded and at peace and humble and steady in your presence. Whenever I talk to you, I always feel like you are so busy actually, but I always feel like there's spaciousness. Like when I talk to you, I know that you've got 1,000 other things to do, but I so appreciate that I feel like you give me your full attention and there's this presence about you that I feel so blessed to be around.
Well, thanks. I think you do develop that knack a little bit when you spend so many years in patient care. And, what I learned is when I was with somebody, no matter how I went in the clinic that day, how I felt personally, what was going on in my life, I just really wanted to give it my all for that individual that I was with and be with them 100%. And I also found that, that was my job, was to carry that space for that person and to be there, not somewhere else. And just to, in that space, allow that individual to be able to speak, to be heard, because most of us just need to be heard. And, so I found that even if I wasn't at my best on a particular day, when I entered that space, I always felt way better at the end of the day, just being in that moment. So it's a practice. And I think it's a practice that all of us need to do more of. I just happen to have 40 years of seeing a lot of folks every day and, developed a little bit of a knack for it, maybe.
Mm, thank you. I hope the audience can see why we have to talk to this guy, right? Like the what are we talking about here with education is education for what? What is the purpose of education? Let's look at some of those deeper questions. Like what is the point of this life? What are we educating ourselves for? In your opinion, what is the purpose of education?
Well, what it's not about is information. And our conventional educational system, which is why I rebelled against it so much when I was in primary and secondary school, is that they just try to cram a lot of information down your throat. And, it's just really not appropriate. What we really have to do is cultivate in students an awareness of who they are in the first place, because we have a planet of adults right now that are very dysfunctional because they've never even entertained the question of who am I? And instead, we are led to believe that we get all this information and then somehow we're going to know what to do with all this and go get a career and live happily ever after. And we're finding that that's really not how it works. Even in past times when people were allowed to have careers and start businesses and everything, there were very few people that were truly satisfied at the deepest level of the soul. So what we really understand now is that we're going into completely new times where careers and businesses and modes of finance, for instance, aren't even going to be the norm in the future. So I'd say people that are getting the bright idea of homeschooling their kids, which is a great first step, that are still doing these curriculums with these, online courses and such that are giving the same information. It's great. The kids are at home. They aren't getting, as much toxicity as they would maybe in a public school system. On the other hand, they aren't preparing their children for the number one fundamental question, which is, who am I? Why am I on this earth in the first place? And what's this future going to be like? What's my place in it? And what worked for people in my generation isn't going to work in the future, because all of those institutions have failed. They were designed to fail. And why prepare for them more in the future? We really have to step out into a whole different way of thinking.
Yeah. Okay. So the the mind goes, okay, I know that the old system didn't work, but I'm not clear about what the new reality looks like that I want to be preparing myself and my children for. So can you talk us through, how do you think about, how do you, you offer a lot of amazing educational content. Where is that generated from, that that this is an important new set of curriculum for us to prepare for the new reality, that help us to get to that same source from which you get inspired to share all of this wonderful educational content?
Young minds are very much more pliable than when kids get to later primary school level, or especially early adult. So that is the best time to really inculcate that understanding of I am. And I am is not a religious concept. It's not a new age concept. It's actually very well grounded in physics. It has to do with the fact that we're all individualizations of the creator. And I am is just that, that declaration of I am that individualization, that authority in my coordinate in the universe. And it's really a resonance, it's a feeling. And again, for most adults, it's very hard to get into that because we've already been brought into our mind so strongly. Now, when our kids were even preschool, just because it was our practice, my wife and myself, we introduced the kids to those concepts. We really help them understand that they are the only authority in their worlds, and that we as adults were there to guide them. We spoke very frankly about the fact that they were old souls, no different than us. They chose us as parents for a very precise reason, and that this was a message, the most important thing that they were to learn in their lifetime, and it was our job to do it. So they sat with us when we did our morning decrees. They listened to dictations and things that really helped bring that resonance home, as far as they were the creator of their own world. And this, what you're doing here, is very near and dear to me, Edith, because my wife and myself, when we first got together, we had a very clear memory with each other. And we knew before this embodiment, we promised each other that we would not forget. And that was so clear to both of us when we first got together. We had an instant recognition, and we knew that we had a job to do, not saying anything grandiose or anything like that. We all have a job to do, but for whatever reason, we had just that clear mission in our heads. We knew we were supposed to do it together. Now, another thing that was very instrumental with both of us is we had this recurring dream over and over and over again. And we were down in on the coast in Northern California here, and we were looking at the ocean, and this huge wave comes overhead. Now, it wasn't an Armageddon destructive sort of wave, but what it was a cleansing, a huge cleansing of our entire realm. And when we turned around and looked at the hillsides after, after it had happened, basically everything was new, sparkling, all the old was gone. And we were on the beach surrounded by children. And so Deb and myself have always known our primary thing here is for the kids. And that was the most important thing, is to usher in a new generation that would build the new world. And so we had the best opportunity by doing it with day one with our kids. We got a lot of practice. And with step one, again, was helping them really come to the realization of who they are. And unlike most adults that go through an entire life and never get that question answered, sometimes never even question it in the first place, that's the place to be. Now, after there's that sense of I am. Now you can start talking about purpose and all those other things that might come down the road in an educational system.
Wow. Okay. So in your case, you homeschooled your kids. It was a couple decades ago. What was your homeschooling journey like? And if you were to do it all over now in this current time, would you do things differently?
Interestingly, I look back at a lot of things in my life that I would do differently, but I wouldn't change much about the way we educated our kids. And I think we were truly guided by the back then, and we really believe that we do have guidance and angels that have had our back from the very start. So we don't take any credit for anything we did. We just kind of one foot in front of the other. So after, if you want to get into a curriculum, the first thing is imagination. You've heard me talk a lot about, waveform physics and all this kind of fancy stuff. And the reason why I get so heavily into that is, part of me really wants to understand how matter and experience is precipitated by us through the levels of ether to create our experience here on the ground. But it all gets very simple when you understand that it all boils down to our imagination, because that is our, primary creative power. And isn't it interesting that when we're in the academic world, we're taught that imagination is not real, when in fact it's the most real thing in the world. So I borrowed a playbook out of the old Tibetan method of academics with my kids. And we spent probably, we did other things, but a good 3 years at least right from the start, where the kids use their imagination to create a palace of their own in their imagination. Now, in this palace, they could do anything they want. They could have all sorts of nooks and crannies and secret places, and it could be huge and hundreds of rooms. And the point is by the end of that exercise, in their minds, they had command of that palace that was no less real than walking through our house and knowing where something is in a certain drawer in the house and so forth. That was their place. Now, when we started getting to the point where we had information that would be helpful for them, just so they could deal in the outer world and not be vulnerable because they didn't know the terminologies, the languages, the mathematics, all those sorts of things. When they got that information, now they could go take those little bits of information, one part at a time, and go put it somewhere in their palace. It might be, down in a little room in a cubby of drawers, and they'd put it there, and then you'd never forget about it. No different than, something in the house, if you put it in the desk drawer, you remember it's there, or at least most of the time you do. So that was the first thing we did. And it was all about imagination. And then when it got to things like mathematics, we didn't do abstractions and symbols so much as making it real. But I would back up a little bit first, and we'd have to talk about, the corollary with the imagination training was ample time in nature. But I'll let you go ahead there.
Wow, very powerful. There's several other speakers that talk about how important daydreaming is, that
Mm-hmm.
how our children, that the huge damage, there's so many things about the conventional public school system, but that one of the hugest damaging things is this like being punished for daydreaming, when in fact that
Mm-hmm.
is the most creative force, that you could actually hone that skill, and that you can really change the nature of reality itself if you really mastered that skill.
Right. So every day we really made an emphasis where we started the day with going down to the beach. We're in Hawaii, and we'd get some exercise. We'd bring our surfboards, and they get to paddle out after they did a little run or do something. I started them both in martial arts when they're 5 years old. I think it's very important for children to have a way to expend their energy and to learn how to channel that energy. And also, we lived in an ideal surrounding. So, doing the martial arts every single day, because I was already involved with it, then it really allowed them to integrate not only a physical culture of some type, but also into a purposeful movement with, a whole intention behind it. So I think besides imagination training, get them out in nature, get them doing physical things, get them outside no matter what. I don't care if you live in a cold environment, bundle up, go outside, and really try to get them into some disciplines, some real disciplines, not disciplines where you come home and do your homework, and kill everything that you should be developing in a child, but things that are really going to bring out the best and channel all of that, ability that's going to allow them now to focus at and create anything they want in life. And if they're already simultaneously getting on that beam that I am the only authority in my world, and they have the ability and the healthy body to house spirit and then to direct that purposeful creative power, it's unstoppable. And that's what we're here to do. And that's what the job of parents is to do, not to cram information down them that's going to be obsolete by the time the kids, are ready to go out and do something on their own anyway.
This is very potent, very powerful. One of the things that another speaker in this conference, Penny Kelly, one of her nuggets of wisdom was be willing to allow your children to be more powerful than you. Talk to us about this.
Yes.
Like when you raise children like this, they don't have the baggage of old programming to undo like we do. Then it's very confronting now when they become so powerful, you know. And so there's a part of us from the old programming that's like, oh my God, my kids are out of control, and they're so powerful. They can get unwieldy sometimes. They're still coming of age, so they've got all these gifts and skills and insights, and of course the uncomfortableness of they call you out on your bullshit and they see right through all this stuff. Talk to us about the inner work to be a parent that can hold this kind of space for our children, because they become such powerful creators that it can be uncomfortable for us sometimes.
Well, life is an expansion process, and having children is just a continuation of that expansion. And when parents have done their inner work and really have a strong sense of their self, then there's really, I think, less trepidation in letting your kids take the reins of their own life. Now, I really believe parents have a job to help them harness that so they aren't all over the place. On the other hand, I think our traditional schooling system, based on competition, and while you're in school, meeting, beating the curve, all that kind of stuff, and then when you get out in the marketplace, then you're competing there as well for jobs and so forth. But in this new world that we are already both feet in, whether we realize it or not, that's not the way it works. And without that competition, then it's just a natural inclination to be in joy when we see that expansion process carried on through our kids and watching them take it the next step, which is their job. And it goes in both directions. When we allow them that freedom to be masters of their own destiny, follow their own path, and become greater than maybe what we achieved in our lifetime, it reflects back on us and we benefit as well. Also, it's not just a one-way street. So it's win-win. And I think that's the way to look at it. And parents, well, I think, most parents love their kids enough where they, take joy in seeing their kids do well. But I think there's another whole level of that we're finally stepping into.
So in Charles's session, he really talked about how so much of our old thinking is thinking that we need to prepare our kids for a future that is already gone, that is already obsolete. Can you help us envision what is this new future, this new reality that we are stepping into or have already stepped into? Can you help us flesh out some of the details of that, of what exactly is this new reality that we're nurturing our kids for? Help us to see more clearly, because it's sometimes like, oh yeah, the more beautiful new earth, it sounds kind of nebulous, so what exactly are we preparing our kids for?
Well, I believe what we're looking at is a future where in this realm we are a people, a self-realized people. And in that realization, we're no longer in need of jobs, in need of finances. And I know this sounds idyllic, but at one time on this planet, that's exactly the way things were. In fact, if it stretches anybody's imagination, what we're doing now is the most far-fetched, unbelievable thing imaginable. But we've considered it the norm because we've never known anything else in this lifetime. So in that realization process, now we embark on, again, getting kids out in nature so they can just observe and resonate and become one with those patterns that create all things. And when it comes to their studies, now we resurrect the true academics of old, which had to do with natural law, with real science, what the old alchemists were up to, mathematics that are living and not just dead mathematics, getting into vortex mathematics and understanding how those, numbers can help us understand the patterns of nature. And also with that realization process, each of us will understand very clearly what it is it turns us on, not for a career, but what excites us. You're doing what you're doing now, Edith, because you have a passion for it. And you aren't doing it for, I don't think, any other reason. I do the same thing. I stay very busy, long hours every day, but it's an absolute labor of love because it's my passion. So if more people found that passion, if they had that space, and homeschool is the ideal place to create that space for children, then they can not only be amazing contributors for a new world and to rebuild institutions that actually serve 7 successive generations and not just selfishly look at material needs here and now, then we will also have a planet of very healthy, happy people.
Yeah, I think that resonates deeply for everybody that's listening right now. There are those practical day-to-day concerns that we often get asked about, like you almost laugh about it. In this community, we all probably laugh about it, but just to address those. When people say, you homeschool your kids, how do they get socialization? How do you like to answer that question?
I wish I had a nickel for everybody every parent that asked me that early on when we were homeschooling. And my pat answer was, how do you socialize your kids when they're in the school with the same teacher and the same crowd of kids every single day? My kids were exposed to kids from all over the island where we live, all the different school systems. They had a lot more free time because they learned, even when they're in their academic portion, when they're a little bit later on, they learned how to just apply themselves, get the job done. And they knew the quicker they did it and did it perfect, then they could go out surfing, and meet their buddies over on the other side of the island or whatever. We had a very large clinic on our property, and we had adults flying in from all over the world for treatment, people from different cultures speaking different languages, so they got to meet up with celebrities and adults and folks from all over the place. And so that to me is socialization. Now, I had an interesting career that allowed them certain advantages like that, but every adult has its own circle of influences and friends, and kids should also, just like the communities of old, have just as much time around the adults in the community. And you get a lot of parenting in different ways from all the other adults in the community, and not just the parents. The parents, of course, have first say in everything, but there's a lot of value that can be passed on by especially the elders in the community and other adults in the extended community. Our kids had that. And as a result, they're kids, normal kids, but they also had a maturity about them. And also, just a little bit more of a depth than the average child has. At a very young age, they could look somebody in the eye and greet them and conduct them in a certain way. And when I meet kids that are just in conventional schools, just having the normal socialization process, they just don't have that depth. They don't have that presence. And it's, you can see it very clearly, the difference between the two environments.
What would you say to all the parents who are currently working at 9 to 5 and they resonate with the heart and soul of what we're sharing in this conversation and in general with this whole conference? But it's a big leap. We're transitioning paradigms right now. And there's, I think, a need to be realistic, practical, gentle, and kind with ourselves with this transition. Like some people aren't seeing how they could change the whole family's lifestyle to accommodate something so fluid and flexible and magical and wonderful. It's like we love the idea of honing imagination, but I gotta get to work and pay my bills, and I got appointments, and I gotta go. I don't have time for this. Talk us through this. We're really talking about transitioning our whole way of life as families, as communities. It's not just about homeschooling. This is not actually a homeschooling conference. This is a transitioning our entire way of orienting to life conference. It's a big undertaking. Talk to us about how to transition.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is for parents that are maybe a little bit stymied and wondering how the heck can I pull this off, to realize that this isn't just about the kids, it's about you. And it's about your ability to reach in to your creative depths and also to start taking some risk. Um, a lot of people along the way would say, well, it's easy for you guys because you're a doctor. And well, excuse me, but how do you think we achieved everything in the first place? We didn't come, my wife and myself, we didn't come from wealthy families. We were self-starters. I've been supporting myself since I was 13 years old. And so, we both just had a dream and we did whatever it took to achieve that, including when we, made the conscious decision to bring kids into this world. And it's such an amazing thing when you can do it consciously, when you know that exact moment of conception. And, that's the sort of thing we need to get back into. But when parents understand it's not about them, and that if they make that decision to bring children in, then not only is it a responsibility, but they have a responsibility to themselves in order to make the changes, whatever it takes. Now, I did mine in a different time when the world, our kids were born in the 70s, and we had a little bit of a different timeline. We could see very early on where the world was headed, that would actually culminate at this exact time, so that we would see exactly what we knew we'd be seeing back then, but we had all those decades to kind of unfold. So now people are going to have to take a crash course, because all of the things that we did that supported us along the way, as far as to create the finances, the systems, get the, all the professional licenses and things that we thought we needed to have back then. I don't think you have time to do that anymore, but I believe it's going to work in our favor. And this whole COVID nonsense was a great step in the right direction, because a lot of businesses were forced to shut down. Families had to readjust. So, like it or not, we all got kicked out of the nest together. And there are going to be opportunities that far exceed what even I had, what appeared to be in easier times back then, because there's going to be a whole planet of people facing the same situation, as we realize our whole reality, thank God, has crumbled right in front of us. And now it's time to build anew. So it's going to be very exciting, and it's going to facilitate those people that have genuine intentions to do exactly what you're talking about, which is, all right, now it's not about a job. It's not about, I don't have the time to teach my kids. It's, there's no time not to. And you just trust we'll have the resources, if you put those intentions out, to pull it off and be in charge of your own kids, reunite the family nucleus, have families recreate our communities, and so forth. So it's going to happen quicker than ever. Some of us just were pioneers a few years before, but now it's like we're all getting thrown in the deep end of the pool together. So it's swim or not. It's not a matter of, oh, can I do it? No, get over that. That's old thinking.
Thank you for that pep talk. During your days of homeschooling your kids, what were the most challenging aspects of it for you? Was it all like rainbows and unicorns all the time? I mean, there must have been some challenges.
Honestly, Edith, I'm trying to be honest. It wasn't that challenging. It was a joy. My wife and myself, from day one, our kids were everything. That was our priority. And the more time we could spend with them, the more joy it brought us. Now, my wife is an amazing reader. She's like a book a day kind of person. And so she took over, some of the academics in that line. I was math sciences and all that kind of thing. So we were a good team. And we had it down where we could spend maybe 3 hours at the beginning of every day. We get the kids set up. We'd each lay out the game plans, for the day and so forth. And those 3 hours that we had with the kids before we put on our clothes and, went over to the clinic and did our thing there, were the most precious hours of the day. And our kids were never a problem. They're kids, they're rambunctious and everything else, but a common question we always had is, how do you get your kids to do what you tell them to do? Now, we didn't yell, or we weren't heavy handed or anything of the such, but we did have very clear intentions, and we had a unified front, the two of us. And, my heart goes out to single parent households, because that's would be a challenge. But, my wife and myself together just had a strong intention. And we also, when we laid something out for the kids, whether it was what they needed to do for that day or otherwise, there was no question. There was a 100% expectation that they would follow through, and they did. And so, parents, I think the first thing we need to learn is that when you're so clear with that expectation, then that is going to carry over to the kids as well. And also, it's going to still in them that same sort of ability to set a strong intention in their life and achieve whatever they want to do. So it all goes back to that resonance of who am I? And do I have the authority to do that? Or does somebody else have authority in my world?
There's a nuance here that I think is worthwhile to unpack because there's a presence, a potency that emanates that is not dictatorial or tyrannical. What's the difference? Because you're very clear in your intention, and this is the expectation. You use the word expectation, but there's a fine line between there and being a tyrant. Maybe talk to us about that.
I I think there's a Grand Canyon between those two things. They're apples and oranges.
Please talk about it.
Yeah, and expectation has nothing to do with the volume in your voice or any emotion in your voice. If you're sitting down in your living room and say, I'm going to get up and go get something to eat out of the fridge, you have an expectation that you can pull that off. It's no different. So why would we not have that same expectation that with every single thing we do in our life, including telling our kids? Yourself in Chinese medicine, you have that Shen and Ko cycle. And, it's a perfect balance between, the nurturing and, and that directive principle of the father. So when you're in that perfect balance, and then when you have that, own that yourself, that is going to carry on as a resonance to your kid. It's not a matter of arguing or acting out. It's just something that they're going to pick up the same resonance that you have. And it's not because they're afraid or anything else. It's what happens. And that's where I think also getting the kids engaged, like we did early on with things like, martial arts and whatnot. And also, by the way, those little groups and things that we had a martial arts school that we had the kids in there in Hawaii. It was heavy Asian influence. So it's very, martial arts were very, prominent, but it was also another school where they got socialization from a whole different group of people. But anyway, back to that little nuance. No, it has nothing to do with being tyrannical at all.
Thank you. I think we needed to hear that. In the beginning days of us wanting to exit the old system that is all kind of like extrinsically motivated based on rewards and punishments, based on grades, some weird random curriculum. Like what is it even for? So many useless things crammed down our throats that we want to rebel against that and just be like wild and free for all. And so this idea of unschooling or radical unschooling gets misunderstood as absentee parenthood. That's a very common first rebellion. And then we yo-yo back and forth until we realize, wow, there's a balanced, harmonious way to step into my true role as a parent or educator, to hold a certain energy, a certain resonance, a certain way of being. What are your thoughts about unschooling or radical unschooling? I know you're familiar with it. You interviewed Dayna Martin and other people that talked about it on your show. Your thoughts about it?
Well, I think it's right on as far as just changing the whole mindset. And correct me if I'm not portraying unschooling properly, but just changing that mindset that school is about learning some kind of indoctrination into, a way so that you can be successful in life. It's about undoing all that stuff in the first place, because again, it goes back to how are kids going to have the space for self-discovery if you don't give it to them? And if you have a curriculum, then how are you going to make room for that? And I understand a lot of people would say, well, you still have to know all the ways of the world, and we don't want our kids to be out there not able to compete. Well, number one, that reality is gone anyway. But what we're finding now is that all the kids that have gone through conventional school have gone all the way through college, can't even get a job anyway. They really don't know anything. They don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know who they are. And so if we allow kids to, again, have that space, and then when it gets to academics, go into the natural sciences and those things that are actually going to create the solutions, going to be things that, kids are going to be able to verify for themselves just by observing nature and then find their own purpose in life. To me, that's unschooling. It's getting rid of all forms of programming so that you can write your own programs. Am I portraying unschooling correctly at all?
Yeah, and there's mixed feelings in the community about using that term because it's still referencing what we
Mm-hmm.
don't want instead of orienting
Mm-hmm.
towards what we do want. And I think that's why I'm calling this journey that we're taking Luminous Education
Mm-hmm.
is a fresh,
Mm-hmm.
let's bring a freshness to the conversation. So the unschooling is, I think, one of the stages of our deprogramming ourselves. And gradually we return to what I think is more like a natural, innate intelligence. There's space for that to
Mm-hmm.
blossom now. So there's natural
Right.
learning, natural curiosity, natural education, a natural way of being who we really are on a deeper level.
Yeah. I think we had an advantage way back when because we didn't have all of these movements. We were just flying by the seat of our pants.
You're just being who you
And
are. You're just being yourself.
yeah, so that's why in recent years, even, I hear things and we interview wonderful people. So I get little bits and pieces as far as, like unschooling and other movements that are out there. But I honestly don't really jump into it at all because we've just always gone by the whole game plan of, you know, do your own life, and there's really nobody you have to ask advice for, or permission, or wonder what to do, because spirit will tell you what you're supposed to do. And for us, it was the same thing with the education with our kids. We just winged it. And both of us had some background and some things that we were already dabbling in. Some of the things I've already shared with you, and they work brilliantly. And a lot of them were things from different cultures that we'd picked up in our studies and our spiritual practices. And it is pretty intuitive, really.
Well, you and Deb are so well-rounded in on your journey, even leading up to parenthood. You had already studied and educated yourself on many diverse holistic topics. For those of us that haven't had that journey under our belt before having kids, how can we create a life where our kids have as holistic, well-rounded experience of their education as your kids did? Any ideas about how we can
Well,
pull that off?
sure, it's start with the inner work as parents. In fact, maybe some of the school that I had a lot of education already at that point. And I look back at a lot of that, and I'm calling BS on it, a lot of it at this point in my life. And, it was okay. It was an experience, I guess I needed for whatever reason. But I, in hindsight, don't think I needed any of that to have done the same exact thing with my kids. Uh, there were things in homeschool that we did that were outside the realm of things we already knew. For instance, we brought in people a couple times a week for languages. We had a friend from Argentina, so we, did Spanish, and then we actually did it with the kids. Kind of made it a family thing. Um, One of my kids, when he was a little older, 15, we went and got our pilot's licenses together. Another one, we sent to Outward Bound, where he went out in wilderness training for a few weeks by himself. We were always getting other groups of kids together, just for different adventures and all sorts of things. So, the one thing I'd like before I forget, I'd say the best, most gratifying thing of any kind of extra time you spend with your kids, call it homeschool, whatever, it doesn't matter, is that you will remain as your children's primary peer group for the rest of their life. My kids are doing very well. They're in their 40s. They have families. We've got grandkids. And, they both call us probably about every day, so we just have a very close family. And so when the kids went through teenage years and those, years that would normally, where they're trying to find themselves in other ways, they actually talk to us. And, we could just be honest with each other and share experiences and relate, from when we were in that point of life and ourselves not that long ago. We're just very real with our kids, which we were able to be because they still trusted us. We were still friends. We're parents, but we were still friends and we were their peer group. And I think that's the biggest tragedy with sending your kids off somewhere else is you lose that connection. And then when they are going through those special rites of passage in their life, like adolescence, that's where you really lose touch. And then you wonder why your kids won't talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of our audience members is in that right now. Any thoughts about how to go back in time and repair some of that?
Boy, go back in time. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing is we can go backwards, forwards, anywhere we want. Now, it might be or seem a little bit more challenging. Yeah, it's a matter of, just sitting down and making that space. It doesn't matter how old your kids are, and you can get there, if you're persistent. But again, it takes the parent really doing their inner work and then just, again, developing that intention of, no, we're going to do this and we're going to reconnect here. And I've seen parents do that. It's not impossible.
Yeah, beautiful. Never too late. I've seen actually there was one of our speakers talk about her child being in their 40s and she was like 60 or 70 and a lot of deep healing of childhood memories that were profound, and so never too late. I think it's helpful for us to be like, okay, I didn't know better back then, now I do know better. So how can I live a new way, and shift our relationship with each other backwards and forwards in time.
And it's an opportunity for parents, of course, to heal all of those deficiencies in their own childhood. Because you get to make it right with your child so it heals your past as well.
This has been such a powerful conversation. And of course, I always love chatting with you. It always feels like such a gift, such a blessing. There's the words that you speak, Dr. Bear, and then there's the transmission, a certain energy that I think everybody can feel as you're speaking the truth in this way. And so to me, that's the best kind of education. To me, you're the best kind of educator. There's a feeling that there's an embodiment of what you're saying, not just like empty words. So it's such a blessing. As we wrap up this conversation, what are you up to lately? How can our audience follow your work and maybe take some of the awesome classes that you guys are offering?
Sure. Right now, we're in the middle of harvest. So we're out there, a few of us that are, you've seen some of the things we grow around here, Edith. We're out there picking leaves right now furiously, and I'm getting a pretty good harvest this year, so I can make things in my lab. We're about to launch our membership site, and our membership site will have a lot of offerings, including videos, recordings of workshops that we do here at the farm. We're delighted that you made our last one here. It's more in the legal law area, but it was actually more about that resonance we're talking about too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have one upcoming that's about making mushrooms part of your food forest. So we're going to have a lot of things. We'll make it available on the site for people that can't make it up here personally. And we're just having fun. And it was kind of a short season because we started late with late rains, and now we're in a heat wave. But we're buttoning up for the fall and getting ready for winter, and already making plans for next season. We're finally building those buildings that was on that empty slab over, that you might remember there. So that's going to be another little business center. So we have a lot of fun things going. So we're at alfavedic.com, and we are a humanitarian foundation, and we have a spiritual mission statement, which is that everything that we do is designed and must serve 7 successive generations. And so that's what we are creating here, a prototype, so that every community can have multiples of little small farms like we do, specializing in different things, so that people are not requiring their needs met by shipping things off from different places where the quality is horrible, and also it costs a lot. So this is part of the new world that we're creating. Is just every community becoming self-sufficient, everybody in the community participating in some way. And, we are a prototype for that.
Super awesome and inspiring. You guys, if you guys ever can make it to one of the in-person workshops at Alpha Beta Gardens, it's just to put your bare feet on the land, the river, the trees, the prana that's in the air is absolutely magical. I feel so blessed that I'm within driving distance from you guys. This has been an incredible conversation, very potent and very realigning. I think we feel different in our bodies after talking with you today. If we could tie up this beautiful conversation with one final piece of advice, what's the most important piece that you'd like us to keep as a takeaway from this conversation?
Well, as we tell everybody every week on our podcast, I think the most important thing is to get back outside, realign with nature. It doesn't matter where you are, if you have to go to a city park or just in your backyard. If you can get, more out into the wilderness, all the better, because I really look at that as the source of all of our ills. We've become so separated from, that part of the ecology that is us. And that separation is what, creates these blocks that so many people are experiencing now. Turn off your devices. I'm so happy that I grew up in a time without devices. So happy that my children grew up before cell phones, and the quality of life was so much better. And then the last thing I'd say is just really contemplate what it means to be, I am the only authority in my world. That is the absolute truth. And when we can wrap our mind around that, everything else falls in place. We'll have all of the resources, the friends, the opportunities that we need to achieve anything we want.
We're all taking that to heart. Thank you so much, Dr. Barre. What a beautiful conversation.
Thank you.
So much gratitude for you. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. Take care of yourself. Hugs to the family.
Thank you.